All right, everybody, welcome back to the Roca News Show. We're almost at the end of the week, and we have some exciting news today. We have a new producer taking over for Billy. Shout out Gus.
Yo, Gus here. Can't replace Billy, but I can try my best.
There we go. So Gus is stepping up as Billy continues to recover. Thank you all for your thoughts and prayers for Billy Carney. And so we have an exciting show today. Frost is still reporting from overseas. Billy's out with an illness, but we're going to give you all exactly what you need to know about the news, what's going on in the world today, and also a deep dive toward the end about the two men who could be saving the Democratic Party. Two fascinating Senate candidates that, again, present a totally different image for the Democrats, have a totally different tone and appeal than existing Democratic leaders, and are getting a ton of organic traction in their states. We don't make political predictions often, but we are pretty confident that both of these figures are going to gain some traction. But before we get into some big stories in that deep dive, let's kick it off with this clip from Fox News.
House is unveiling a presidential walk of fame featuring portraits of U.S. presidents, with the exception of former President Joe Biden. The new display just outside the Oval Office along the colonnade there shows a framed photo of an auto pen writing Biden's signature in place of the former president's portrait.
Okay, what unserious times we're in. It's pretty wild to think about what has to get reported in the news today. And I don't know if this is taking positive steps toward lowering the temperature in the country, that kind of political jab. But there you go. That's where we are today. So we also have another update. We want to play a clip now from Kamala Harris, who's been doing a tour for her book. And she was just on The View. And we want to play one of these clips because they've been making the rounds and we haven't covered this yet. But here's also the other side of the aisle.
And by the way, another piece of what is unprecedented and a bit historical about that race, it is the closest presidential race in the 21st century in terms of the outcome.
Wow. Yeah.
The closest.
Yeah. You know, say that again, because he likes to say over and over again he's got a mandate.
And that's part of why I wrote this book.
We saw this clip. First of all, to see the lack of fact-checking on The View as the people stand up for truth and democracy, it's pretty bizarre to see because this wasn't even the closest presidential election of the 2020s. In fact, the 2020 victory of President Joe Biden was narrower than Trump's victory in 2024. So just that clip is honestly less about Kamala Harris because, of course, she's going to sell a book and make millions off of sort of this postmortem of her candidacy, and she says she didn't have enough time and this and that, even though her poll numbers tanked the more exposure she had. But still, this sort of election denialism in a way where she just sort of misrepresenting the outcome is better. I think Trump won with 312 electoral votes. Biden won with less. Trump in first term won with less. Bush in 2004 and 2000, I believe, both times won with less. So anyways, it's just a misleading statement. And then we also saw this from Kathy Griffin. So this is Kathy Griffin. You may recall her as the actress who got in trouble for basically holding up the bloody head of Trump. She's now just out of the game. Remember all this talk about how only Trump has denied election results? Here's Kathy Griffin with Don Lemon discussing her theory on the past election.
So all right, look, you ready for a tinfoil hat moment?
I'm sorry?
Are you ready for a tinfoil hat moment?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just going to be bold and say this. And, you can take issue with this all you want. I do not think he won in a free and fair election. How do you like that, lefties?
Wow. All right.
I said it. I'm Kathy Griffin, and I do not think...
Well, she goes on and she talks a little more about how there's tampering, specifically... Gus, you're looking great there, by the way.
Thank you. Sorry
no, you're looking... I love it. Shout out Nebraska, by the way. Dylan Raiola, Minnie Mahomes. But Kathy Griffin essentially, with Don Lemon not pushing back one iota, is denying that 2024 was free and fair. So there's a lot of this hysteria about the 2028 election. You also have Trump teasing a third term, which of course is unconstitutional at this point. And so there's a lot of weird energy. Gavin Newsom saying we're not sure we're going to have an election in 2028. Listen, if the last couple weeks have taught us anything, it's that we need to lower the temperature. I mean, this is just absurd. As a nonpartisan news company where we have readers on the left and the right, I mean, the polling we've done with our own bases, it's perfectly symmetrical on both sides. I mean, we hear from our community regularly, from you all when we meet you in person on the road, in our DMs, in our inbox, everywhere, that you're just tired of this kind of rhetoric. And also the blatant hypocrisy. Everyone on the left talking about the right's denial of the 2020 election, but not discussing, Stacey Abrams denying the 2018 Georgia gubernatorial outcome, or Gore casting doubt about the 2000 election, and now Kathy Griffin with Don Lemon, a prominent media commentator on the left. So anyways, now if you're a Democrat and you're watching this, there are two figures at the end of this who might give you a little more hope. So we'll talk about them. Before that we do that, let's do the news rundown. So, all right, that was probably a little too much of a prelude, but a couple of stories going on in the world today. So number one, Amazon Prime is found guilty for basically misleading consumers into signing up for Prime by doing various promotions online, like if you want 2-day free shipping, click here. Amazon is going to pay $2.5 billion for its deceptive Prime membership practices, and you are eligible for $51 payments if you've used 3 or fewer Prime benefits during any 12-month period between June 2019 and June 2025. So if you were a Prime member during any 12-month period and only got 3 or fewer Prime benefits, you can get $51. And they say the FTC, that is the Federal Trade Commission, says that 40 million consumers were affected. So collect that money. Amazon in trouble, $2.5 billion antitrust speeding ticket. So shout out to all of you who were duped into getting Prime. All right, for the next story, we have shutdown firings being threatened. So this is a big story because right now Trump and congressional Democrats are feuding about a funding bill, and if it doesn't get settled before the end of September and the start of the new fiscal year, the government will shut down. Well, Trump is warning federal agencies to prepare for mass layoffs. He's basically saying, and not just temporary ones, permanent ones. So President Trump is feuding with Hakeem Jeffries and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer over a funding agreement. And he is now saying, listen, I'm not going to meet with them, and federal agencies prepare for mass layoffs. So right now, Chuck Schumer is saying this is an attempt at intimidation, and that essentially Trump is using politics to punish hardworking families and this and that. And this comes off obviously on the heels of DOGE, which saw 300,000 federal workers leave their jobs this year. 154K were from buyouts. Remember, the government offered federal employees buyouts if they wanted to leave their job. But so the government's already lost a lot of workers this year, and Trump's now threatening to push out more. And Trump has called the proposals of Democratic leaders unserious. He's called them unserious and ridiculous. So we'll see if they meet. We'll see if they find an agreement. I mean, this is an annual affair at this point, threatening government shutdown. So that is the latest from Trump world. And before we get to the deep dive story today about Democrats, we also have another positive scientific breakthrough story. So Huntington's disease, which you may be familiar with, it's essentially a brain disorder. It strikes people usually in their 30s or 40s, causes brain cells to die, leading to uncontrolled movements, all this stuff, cognitive decline, dementia. Terrible disease, very also genetic, as in any kid of a parent with Huntington's has a 50% chance of inheriting the disease. Excuse me. Well, guess what? A Dutch biotech firm has developed a gene therapy that slows the disease's progression by 75%, according to clinical trials. And so basically what would have happened in 1 year of the disease now stretches out over 4 years. So again, more positive news. And we love to get to, some positive scientific breakthroughs, often underreported. This comes after Yesterday's breakthrough and the general news we shared last week about cancer survival rates increasing in the U.S. and most developed countries. So there's a lot of progress happening. And they're hoping, by the way, that if it gets approval, this Unicure, that's the name of this Huntington's disease gene therapy, the company behind it, they're hoping that this therapy will launch in 2027 if approved. So there you go. Very exciting news. And now we go to a fascinating story about the Democratic Party. So listen up. The Democratic Party is historically unpopular. A Wall Street Journal poll found that the Democrats are at their lowest rating in the last 35 years. And the stunning, yet here's the article, and we might not be signed in to get past the paywall for this site, but the chart essentially shows the net approval rating of Democrats, and the net favorability is currently minus 30. Okay, for Republicans, I believe it's minus 11. So Democrats are just historically unpopular. When you poll voters, and we talk to our own readers and viewers and community members, the words we often hear, they're unorganized. Who's their clear leader? Is it Zoran? Is it AOC? Is it Bernie? Anyone on the sort of progressive left? Is it a more moderate Democrat like Roy Cooper of North Carolina, Andy Beshear of Kentucky, Wes Moore of Maryland, even a Gavin Newsom of California? Who is it? Is it someone in between like Gretchen Whitmer or J.B. Pritzker of Illinois? Gretchen Whitmer, of course, the Michigan governor. You have all these different factions and no clear leader. You also, of course, had the throttling, Kamala Harris, in last fall, and where she loses all 7 swing states. She doesn't flip a single county from red to blue from 2020 to 2024 nationwide. Not a single county of the thousands nationwide. So it's clear the Democrats have a problem. Now, to be clear, Trump's approval ratings are swirling the drain right now. I mean, they're in a really bad spot. He's lost a lot of support from a number of his younger voters. His approval rating among Trump voters who are under 30, I want to say, is now like 70%. So he's lost a lot of support among young voters. So he's not in a great position, but the Democrats make him look like, Kim Jong-un in North Korea, just in terms of like he in charge and popular, at least according to their, fake poll numbers. But okay, so they have this problem. Now I'm going to describe to you 2 fascinating Senate candidates that we couldn't help but wonder, are we going to see more of this? I'll describe them before we show you a clip of them. I'm going to describe them for you, and you tell me if they sound like a typical Democrat. So the first one is an oyster farmer in Maine who has a red beard, a dad bod. He served in the military, and he has a dirty hoodie. He's often wearing like Pit Viper sunglasses. He has a gruff voice. He sounds like he could narrate the Home Depot commercials. He's got this whole manly man mystique to him. I mean, that's his aura, that's his vibe, that's everything. He probably sounds a lot like a Republican, right? Well, he's not. Gus, let's hit this clip from Graham Plattner's. Now, he's running for Senate in Maine. He wants to unseat Susan Collins, the moderate Republican who served 5 consecutive terms. So here's his commercial, a totally new look for the Democratic Party.
What I love most about Maine are the people. I have never met people who are more hard scrabble, even in a place that requires you to work like 2 or 3 different jobs. We have watched this state become essentially unlivable for working class people, and it makes me deeply angry. My name is Graham Plattner, and I'm running for U.S. Senate in Maine to defeat Susan Collins. A decade of military service going overseas, farming oysters to feed my community, diving to lend a hand to other fishermen, trying to start a family. But everywhere I've gone, it seems like the fabric of what holds us together is being ripped apart by billionaires and corrupt politicians, profiting off of destroying our environment, driving our families into poverty, and crushing the middle class.
All right, we can pause this one. And now I'm going to describe for you, before we go back into Graham Plattner's platform and his own story. Now I'm going to describe for you someone. We won't show a campaign commercial, just a quick clip here, but I'm going to describe this person before you watch it. So this guy, he looks like he's a character in Book of Mormon. I mean, he's white. He's got well-combed brown hair. He's the grandson of a Baptist preacher. He's a Texan. He's in seminary school himself. He speaks before crowds standing on top of a rusty pickup truck with a white church with the Texan flag right behind him. He looks very much like he'd be, again, a MAGA Republican. But here he is, James Tallarico, running for
so here's some examples of things
Democratic
Christian
Senator.
nationalists have taken Trump as their new Christ because he's everything the first one was not. Jesus was poor. Trump is rich. Jesus was meek. Trump is a bully. Jesus lost. And Trump is obsessed with winning. I honestly think that if Donald Trump and J.D. Vance met Jesus today, they would ridicule him as a single, childless hippie. And in fact, Donald Trump Jr. explicitly rejected Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. He said, turning the other cheek has, quote, gotten us nothing.
All right.
How did we get...
So I bring up these two figures because they have developed a sort of cult, like especially James Tallarico, that this second guy. I recently saw a video of a campaign event he was hosting in Dallas, and the line was around the block. It's Zoran-esque. It's sort of this grassroots appeal that you often see before their poll numbers reflect it as he gets his name out there, because James Tallarico is not a household name. I mean, he was on Rogan earlier this year, and Rogan said he should run for president. This is Joe Rogan, whose interview with Donald Trump was the most watched interview of any sort for the 2024 presidential election, and who endorsed Trump, and who's at inauguration, and who helped lead this sort of young male revolution against the Democrats. He likes James Tallarico. In fact, Rogan just had on Matthew McConaughey, and they talked about James Tallarico. So you have James Tallarico, who's, especially after seeing images from Charlie Kirk's memorial, where you saw all these Christians gather in what felt like a tent revival and felt like a mega church. And here's James Tallarico, who can speak that language, probably speak it better than almost anybody who actually spoke at Charlie Kirk's memorial service. He's the grandson of a preacher and a seminarian himself, and very eloquent guy. And he has such a base now as someone who pushes progressive policies, but also speaks about lowering the temperature. He doesn't do it perfectly. In fact, he just tweeted recently, we're the only thing standing between this country and fascism. He said, we as in the Democratic Party. So he does dial up the temperature, but after Charlie Kirk, he gave a very eloquent tribute to Kirk, saying he was our sibling, saying he is someone was worthy of unconditional love, and basically a very nice tribute to Kirk. So James Tallarico is now getting this sort of cult-like appeal that you started to see early on with Zoran before, again, the polls reflected in national media caught up to it. But I think that James Tallarico is going to keep getting traction. He's polling right now at 7% among Democratic candidates for the nomination. They still have Beto O'Rourke and Jasmine Crockett are leading the way. But that's due to name recognition. So this is a totally different side. And then you have Graham, who's looking to unseat Susan Collins. And Graham, to be fair, I read that he was voted the most likely to lead a revolution in his high school class. So that's a unique superlative to have. And I think his yearbook quote had something like free, and then he listed, like 10 countries or ethnicities, including free Palestine. And so he's been on this for a while. He was quoted when he was 18 on local TV criticizing President George W. Bush. He served overseas. So maybe he's been plotting this he's clearly been political for a long, long time. But man, in the same way that Tim Walz fell flat among male voters in 2024, or sorry, not in the same way, in the opposite way, he sort of will beat any allegation that he's like a fake macho man. I mean, he's hard to argue against. Like, Graham Plattner is the kind of guy that high school boys would be afraid to date their daughter. Like, that is who Graham is. So who knows, as you know, he's still new. That YouTube video we played only has 63,000 views. But he just had a New Yorker profile. We've been following him for a bit because we first saw his campaign ad and we were like, is this an ad for Bass Pro Shops or, Home Depot? What is this? It almost felt SNL and like, the Democrats, like who they should run next time. But he's a real person and he speaks effectively against the oligarchy. And he says like, Susan Collins is one of the politicians who sold you out in Washington, D.C. She's a politician that doesn't fight for you and affordability. I'm telling you, I want to go to Maine to see how people are reacting to Graham because Maine has a sneaky opioid issue in the rural parts of the state. It has a cost of living issue like most big cities do in Portland, right along the coast. And it's a blue state, red rural district. And remember, it's along with Nebraska, it splits electoral votes. So the rural district went toward Trump this past election. But it's a fascinating state. It's blue, but it's always had Susan Collins, who's been kind of like this sort of moderate Republican. And she's the longest serving Republican woman senator in history. And I believe the longest serving Maine senator. So she's been popular, but could she be unseated by Graham Plattner, who's very much part of this like America first, but from a leftist perspective thing? And by the way, I should note that James Tallarico of Texas, he refused APEC funding. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. So as the Democrats are at a historic low in popularity, a 35-year low, unbelievably unpopular, especially with young men, these two candidates who seem 100% MAGA, Graham Plattner, red beard, dad bod, dirty hoodie, shows up, works with his hands, strong, military veteran. Then James Tallarico, white, Texan, preacher, grandson of a Baptist preacher, speaks evangelical vernacular with fluency. These two people are running for Senate, could be part, and by the way, are unapologetically progressive. They have a clear cost of living case, which many feel that the Democrats ignored in this last cycle. Could these two help turn around the Democrats' popularity? Because to be clear, there might be an elephant in the room. When you heard two Democrats who could turn around the fortunes of the party, you might have thought we were going to say Zohran Mamdani, but Zohran Mamdani would not win a national election. I mean, as of right now, at least. Things could change, of course. But he would not have appeal in, say, Ohio or Wisconsin or Pennsylvania or Georgia or, a lot of these key bellwether states. Now, he might win in New York. He might get the Bushwick, Brooklyn vote, but he's not going to win a national election. But Graham Plattner and James Tallarico, they have a different brand. They sort of go past identity politics and unpopular issues for the left, or they dismantle them through a lens of masculinity or Christianity, tools often used by the right today. And they are very effective at selling progressive policies. And we've seen this on the road so much. It's true of much of our audience. Many feel that the Democrats have just totally abandoned the working class. You cannot criticize these two, at least their platforms and their rhetoric for that. So we thought we'd bring up these two candidates to your attention as people who could reverse the fortunes of the Democratic Party. And so there you go with a deep dive on Graham Plattner and James Tallarico. We go much more in depth on their own stories, on their platforms, on their specific issues in our We the 66 newsletter, which we'll link to in the description. Stay tuned for that. But Graham Plattner and James Tallarico, I just thought that's fascinating. And we do, I must say, have a unique perspective at Roca, traveling across the country, interviewing people everywhere. And their sort of focus on cost of living, their rejection of AIPAC. Graham Plattner is unapologetically pro-Palestine. I just think it'll play well with young voters. Whether it should or shouldn't is up for debate, but they're at least worth highlighting and are fascinating two candidates. So there you go. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Make sure to smash that subscribe button. Make sure to give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and also Spotify. And comment what you think of these two candidates and what the Democratic Party needs to get back on track. So, Gus, thank you for joining. Here,
My
I'll do
My pleasure.
a little round of applause for Gus. Great to have him on board. Nebraska, tough loss this Saturday.
Yeah, it wasn't great, but we live and we move on. So
You live and move on. I love that. Well, you've been doing a lot of moving on. But listen, Dylan Raiola, I still have faith. I still think he can, put together a good season for the Huskers.
like statistically, he's like top 3. But on the cringe meter, he's off. So.
Yeah, the Mahomes stuff is crazy. Well, awesome. Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching, and have a wonderful Thursday. One more day.